beginning I wanted to prepare more a workshop situation, but then there was this rumor that there could be 50 people in the room. So I changed it more towards the presentation, but so we are now more in a presentation situation. But yeah, I would like to give a short introduction to myself. So my name is Nele Möller. I'm originally from Germany, but I live in Brussels at the moment since a couple of years, where I'm doing a PhD at the Lucas School of Arts in Karl Leuven, and my research project oscillates around the Thuringian forest in Germany, in East Germany, that grows around the town where I grew up in. And this forest is like many other, or like all forests around the globe, very impacted by the climate crisis. And it is actually a very old-grown forest. It exists since around 10,000 years. But and it was always a mixed forest, but then it went through a couple of transformation, human-made transformation, and mainly in the last 2 centuries, with the beginning of the industrialization, it got transformed to a spruce monoculture, because the spruce tree is a very, how we heard already in the presentation before, is a very straight and fast-growing tree, and so it could feed into the greed of the wood industry. And but the spruce, though it is very fast and straight-growing, it's not very deep rooting. So it has a very hard time now with the hot and dry temperatures, because the roots have a hard time to access the groundwater. And so they get very stressed and weak. Also, how we heard yesterday with Markus Meder, that you can hear actually how stressed they are, and that then the bark beetle also hears these noises of these trees trying to pump up the water in the water in the wood tissue. And so there's a huge bark beetle infestation right now in the forest, and the forest management answers with intensive clear cuts, so the forest is disappearing at the moment. And in my project, I try to follow these changes and the developments of the forest, but also imagine possible futures through forms of listening and sound. And I'm working together with foresters and forestry workers and forestry scientists, but also other community members around the forest, like herbal women, activists and hunters, but also the forest itself, so trees and fungi and animals and plants. So therefore field recordings, or recordings also of interviews, are very important in my project. But then in the course of my research, I came to realize that I also question my own field recording practice. Especially when working with the hunter together, I started to realize that actually my practice of recording and his practice of hunting are actually not that far from each other. We both hide in the forest to catch animals in a weak position. We both go out in the forest at dusk and dawn when the animals are most active. We wait for long hours to catch the best animal or the best sound. He uses a hunting rifle, I sometimes use a shotgun microphone, so there are a lot of similarities. And so I started to question my own practice, and therefore came to doing more research on field recording practices and the critical reflection on it. And that's what I would like to share with you today. And before we start the session, I also would like to put a small disclaimer that I'm not aiming to one or right or correct approach of field recording, or to establish like some form of ethical correctness, or to even claim that I'm in the position of knowing the right way to do it. It is rather that we are thinking together towards a joint critical reflection on the practice of field recording, and think through the different entanglements, tensions and relations within the practices. And also through that reflect on our own ways of producing art and using sounds we record. And yeah, and now I would just shortly be interested who is like constantly working with field recording in their practice, just to get a quick overview, to maybe just hands up. Okay, it's actually not that many, but I guess almost every one of you already did the field recording, maybe in there. Okay. Yeah, and before I would start my presentation, I would like to do a small listening exercise, also for me to calm a bit down, but also for you. And yeah, I was wondering if we should go outside, but I think in the outside it's also very sunny. If we stand there for a couple of minutes, if it's fine, or we can just stay inside. Yeah, I mean, maybe it would be nice to quickly go outside and. Okay, then let's go. What is field recording? So if you type in field recording in the search engine and you look through the images, that is the first images that come. And what is very obvious that there's a certain stereotype around the field recordist. So it seems to be a middle-aged white dude with outdoor gear and pointing a microphone towards the environment. And yeah, so that is a continuation since some decades, what we have in our head still, or not we, but apparently Google. And so yeah, it's a long-term notion that is embedded in the evolution of field recording, and that I would say starts with the presumably first field recording did by Ludwig Koch, and so of course that is supposedly the first field recording, but before that there were also of course other ways of field recording, like writing is a way of recording, or certain musical pieces that would imitate the environment, or the use of special instruments in different cultures that would imitate bird songs or other voices of the ecology. But yeah, Koch was the first one who used in 1889 the back then newly developed wax cylinder phonographs that he got from his father to do a recording of a common charmer bird. And yeah, so that's now called the first field recording, and I would say we take a quick listen into that.
In 1889, my father presented me with one of kind of toy. I was only 8 years old at the time, and as a musician I loved to listen to the song of caged birds. And without knowing it, I became a pioneer of recording nature sounds with this very primitive form of recording on a wax cylinder. The bird was an Indian bird, a charmer, a bird size of our blackbird. In my young days, one of the favorite cage birds. This wax cylinder is the only one of my early recordings still in my possession. Listen to the primitive but first recording ever made of the sound of a bird.
So, but what we don't hear in the recording is that Koch actually recorded the bird in a cage, how he later stated in an interview. So that brings the question up, what actually is the field if we talk about field recording? So yeah, if you type in field recording in Wikipedia, it says that the field is everything outside of the studio space or the laboratory, or everything outside of a controlled environment. But this firstly points to the nature-culture divide that is so deeply embedded in our knowledge system. Like the inside the studio is culture, outside the studio is nature. But and also how we see on this picture that field recordings are often based on short-term excursion into some supposedly or underexplored territories to extract their sonic qualities, bring them home and use them as content or effects in sound work. And simultaneously, field recordings are also often used in more scientific fields, like biology, geography, or anthropology, where they have, of course, also a huge colonial historical background. And they are often used as a supposedly transparent representation of the environment. But the question is a field recording really that objective, how it is claimed to be? And is the situation we are recording in really that uncontrolled? And are we also not part of the field? And also thinking about all the decisions we made while recording, the microphones we want to use, where we point the microphones, how we process the recording. So I would say that rather field recording is a curated event, and every field recording is a fiction. And Jacek Smolici says to this in his essay Acoustic Ethics, that a more critical and ethical approach to working with field recording is about recognizing that any act of sound recording is closely related to the notion of field. In other words, any act of recording is field recording. In this context, field is much more than just a physical space. It encompasses a set of relations between the involved subjects. So, what are the relations that are involved in the recording process and that determine the field? So that are some relations I make out in my field recording practice, but also through the work of other field recorders. And of course, you can always add to that, and I would also open this towards you, that there are of course other relations involved. So there's the recordist, of course, and the recorded, technology involved, the agency and consent involved in the recording, ownership, skills, and positionality, and then of course others, but I pointed out these ones as the most important ones within my practice. And to look at these different relations, to work towards a situated and embodied field recording practice that is based on care and the ability to attune to one's environment in order to know when to record or not to record. And now I would like to go with you through these different set of relations. So first, I think the most obvious one, the relationship between the recordist and the recorded. And so each field recording is entangled in this power relationship between the recordist and the recorded subject, and that is constantly haunting from colonial structures of gathering and collecting for science exploration and following and transforming these structures. And Mark Peter Wright says about this power relationship, this asymmetrical relationship is the foundation for any environmental recording activity. I, as the recordist, point the microphone. I capture, remove, and manipulate the sound of places, people, animals, and phenomena. Recording is built out of this imbalance and uneven distribution of human and non-human power. And in his research, Mark Peter Wright also points to the presence of the recordist in the recording, which in the different science fields and artworks is also often a position of silence, which almost underlines the objective or transparent promise of the recording. And he says about this, the promise of self-erasure is an empathic, non-invasive tactic tied to claims of conservationism and certain art philosophical motives of moving beyond the human and other energies and agencies. But it is actually denying one's own presence without which the recording would not have been possible. So claiming this position of moving beyond the human, a human-free representation is basically a lie. And he terms this moment, this silence, actually this noisy non-self, that points to the hegemonic silence of the recordist. And it's a chimeric figuration that seeks to collapse human, animal, and technological binaries and prompt ethical critique to silencing oneself in the recording. But how to disrupt the power imbalance between the recordist and the recorded? So I think first of all, it's very important to acknowledge that every recorded subject has agency, also the modern human. And through that, we have to work through the notion that nature is all the time available for us. And also to be aware of one's own positionality as a listener and recordist. For me, it's a constant reflection on my own position in the recording. So before I'm pressing the record button, I also always ask myself a couple of questions where I do notations on, and then I attach them to the recorded file I have, so that I later on can see what my actual situation in the place was, and that I also know when I later on work with the field recordings or I assemble them, that I still have my own position in view when at the moment of the recording. So these questions are: how do I relate to the place I'm recording in? How did I come here? Where do I come from? With what intention am I doing the recording? How much time did I spend before recording? And what is my relationship to the recorded? And then, of course, the question, what am I hearing and what am I not hearing, actually? So, and to point to that as listeners, we build something that will always be a combination of subjective and cultural experience, memories, association, and affects. And then, of course, involved in the recording process are also the skills or also decision one makes during the recording. Making decisions within the skill set is a huge part also of the narrative that we tell with the field recording work. And I would separate them in technical and empathic skills. But they are, of course, also entangled. So the technical skills monitor the recording and surroundings, control of level and gears, documentation while recording, and afterwards handling, annotating, and tagging the recorded material, editing, and file management. And then the empathic skills, knowing when to record or not to record, the ability to leave a situation, a place, to feeling into comfort or discomfort of the recorded, feeling into my own comfort and discomfort, and also the decision of staying with it or not, not letting my own anticipation rule the recording, and of course also editing and contextualization the recording, because also with editing and processing comes a lot of responsibility. For example, the idea of the sublime pure nature is often reproduced in field recording works through the use of clean recordings, through the removing of unwanted sounds or noises, the overdubbing of several field recordings, and other ways of having this intention of this very untouched nature. And so in this editing process comes also a decision we make about who and what belongs to the environment. And so there's a lot of friction there. And then, of course, with moving between these different skills comes also the handling of recording equipment and technology, and that is involved in the recording process. So the technology is, of course, another active partner in the recording. And we could say that field recording is like listening with another set of ears. And because often microphones are much more sensitive than our human ears, and but also with this other set of ears comes also the certain environmental footprint that should be considered and kept in mind when recording, as all equipment and media I use also has a relationship to natural resources, of course. And something that is Mark Peter Wright is calling mycologies, so the batteries of the recording device, the polyvinyl chloride SD card for storage, the material the microphone is made of, like plastic, copper, cobalt, neodymium, and so forth. So, and that not only comes with an environmental footprint, but also feeds into a geopolitical resource extraction. So there's still this notion of the field recording prevailing as a process that is quite non-invasive towards the environment, but when thinking about these components, it also gets quite clear that the use of certain field recording equipment also has an environmental and geopolitical impact that cannot be denied and should be considered when recording or before recording. As well, of course, traveling to certain places, entering natural habitats we maybe should not enter, and so on. So something we should be quite aware about. And then also thinking about technologies comes also acknowledging the discrepancy between the sound listened to and the recorded sound. So something Aaron Murray Schaefer called schizophrenia, that is a term from quite old already, 1969, and just for the people who don't know what it means. This term goes back to the invention of electroacoustic devices for the transmissions of sound, with which every sound could be recorded and broadcast to the whole world. Originally, this was not possible because each sound was primary and could only be heard once. Schizophrenia is the separation from this original sound and the recording of it, and the term focuses on the adverse effects for the individual and society as a whole. So that is something, of course, we can also use as a tool in recording works. Like yesterday, sitting in the concert room and listening to the sounds of the rainforest is, of course, also very weird because we are not in the rainforest, but on the other hand, it shows also our separation. So we can use it as a tool, but we should be also aware about that we separate the sound from its actual environment, and that we maybe also underline even this nature-culture divide we so implemented in our knowledge system, and that feeds into constant extraction. And then with the recorded sound that we extracted from the environment, of course, comes another question, the question of ownership. So with the recorded material comes a lot of responsibility. What context do I give the recording? What do I want to gain, reach with the recording? What kind of nature do I want to reproduce, represent? So Hildegard Westerkamp says to this, how do we avoid the very real danger of simply creating yet another product, a CD with yet more amazing sounds? In the worst case, they have become an imported product, a neat sound without any real meaning beyond the wow experience. We must ask ourselves when we compose a piece or produce a CD whether we, in fact, bring our listeners closer to a place or situation, or whether we are fooling ourselves and are inadvertently assisting in the place extinction. Wie lange noch? Okay. Coming. So yeah, I think that's a very important point. And then yeah, with the ownership and the recording as well, something I scratched on earlier already, comes the question of agency and consent of the recorded. And especially when thinking about recording the modern human or the environment, it's not so common to think about agency and consent in that situation. And this concept comes from the rights of nature movement, so the environmental and legal concept that advocates for granting legal rights and protections to ecosystem, natural features and modern human entities such as rivers, mountains, forests and animals. And is against the Western idea that everything is available for us for collecting, cataloging, revealing and reporting upon. But the big question is how to get consent of the modern human. That is, of course, a very slippery question and speculative question. And I think we touched on this already a bit in the symposium, but I think it is developing certain practices of listening, so engaging with the deep listening method by Paulina Oliveros, but also relational listening by Amakangisa or hyper listening by Buddhacica Chattopadhyay, and of course there are many more, but to find a form of attunement or situated listening practices when we arrive at the place where we want to record. So a sensing, a tuning in, a listening into the fact if I'm invited in the place, so listening for permission. And also the question, how invading am I by recording? And then Amakangisa and Suetot say gut feeling is also a form of listening. So we feeling into do I have a right of doing a recording at this moment? So in the end it's about finding attunement and developing a form of acoustic care. So a constant reflection on the relations entangled in the recording process. Always listen before recording. If it's not a clear yes, it's basically a no. And also listening to my own mistakes and accountability within the recording process. And with this, I would like to go back to the web of relations and imaginative field recording you did in your head, and maybe we can just open the discussion what you think where your field recording is moving between these different relations, or also maybe, because we have not so much time anymore, if you have general questions or things you would like to add.
Thank you very much for putting this out in this systematic way and putting it together. It's very important. And so maybe the most, as you yourself said, the most extreme or the most pivotal question would be, consent of the mountain, if you call it, or wood or river. And somehow I feel it of course, like everything, all the conflict and the problems and the unethicalness has to do with power relations. But there are always relations that are not, maybe not power relations, but relations that are unequal or they're just different. Like, you know, the power of the stream could be to suddenly overflood while I'm standing there trying to record, or an animal could attack me or something like that. So, I don't know, I'm just thinking that, two things. One thing, this idea of getting the most extravagant field recording is something that is really, you know, it's very questionable, because it really means this, you know, grabbing the best. And I think we always have to ask, are we following that path? For myself, I have to say, I'm really not. I've collaborated with people who are totally into this, and it's so weird to me, because for me, a field recording is actually sort of, in a sense, or I like to believe, and we can all question this, I put on these headphones after having listened for a while in space, and then I see what happens, and then I still don't know what I've actually recorded until I go back home and I re-listen, and I've had a lot of things where I thought, oh, this is really uninteresting, but it didn't matter because I was there, and so on. And then just by this whole relation of dealing with this recording, it's a dialogue. And what you do with it, the work is a dialogue. It's like other artists who work with yellow, and yellow in itself is nothing, and then you work with what you've listened to. But what I actually wanted to say, so I will finish soon, this experience of being present and a deep listening with the means of technology, with all the problems attached to that, as you also mentioned. So I think that's, and then I sometimes ask myself a lot, where have we lost this? Also a more natural form of communication, also with others. You know, why do we have to go to an event and everyone has to be tagged, you can't be in a picture no one will ever see anyway, because someone is that small. I mean, it's weird. It's like asking yourself, you have to drink 2 to 3 liters a day. You know, you should drink when you're thirsty. At what point did we lose this? And for me, it's also a little bit that question. You know, learning with what you're doing, and that having that as of course, always questioning it.
Yeah, I think also it's a very empathic form of listening or feeling into a situation, but that comes, of course, also with the reflection of one's own position, and to also see the other positions. Like when thinking about like making a picture in a room, it's one feels in a way like that, but then someone else feels, even when it's a small picture, so there come other relations into play, why one also would not like to have his picture or his voice on a recording, or but I think like developing more like a framework around this could be quite helpful actually. So that's what I try to do, to grow in this like constant reflection stage of like around these different relations, and of course there are many more, but to be aware about this. And then also when talking about the environment, because I think it's so great for us that we are always like, also if it's just a sound recording, but we're so used, we can just take it, but maybe
maybe one more sentence, this idea of I mean, there's so many. I think there is a real problem, and the real problem is that we're at a point where we have everything is so heightened in the problematicness, and so it becomes so absurd. You know, this whole getting consent, and everyone's documenting their heads off all the time. Where are all these documentations? What clouds are they being stored on? Who will see them if we all go extinct? I mean, it's crazy. It's if you think about it. And at the same time, we're building these, you know, and I think there's so many very wicked problems, and everywhere we find them. So maybe that's just.
So, I mean, like listening to this, I feel like, oh my God, I'm not allowed at all for instance, the animals. Like my experience is, or was very often really like a yes from the animals. You know, like I was sitting on a half island where I lived, and I played a little bit, and we were done with playing and sitting in silence, and then the sea, it just came flying by and really close. And then I think if there wouldn't be a permission for us to do this, he wouldn't be there. So at the same time, I also, it's my human view to interpret this action. Maybe it was also like, who are these? I don't know. I mean, this is really a big question right now for me as well. Like I was recently in Mexico, and we played, and the turkey vultures came down while we played, and they left and were done. So, and it was quite nice for us, but maybe it was completely different from their side. So I don't know. So no, but it's also interesting. I recently spoke to an ornithologist who said, like, if you play or do actions in the frequency of the bird, it's really threatening for them. So it's like, oh my God, I'm playing flute. You know what? Like, maybe I should not play flute anymore. It's this, or like if you record a bird and you play it back, or like you try to imitate the bird, it's really threatening for them. And so maybe also, yeah. So these are big questions. And then also in Mexico, I had this experience. I was with Tanya Rubio in the Accuracy Ecology Lab, and we always had to ask her permission to do recordings. And this was, in the beginning, it was super strange, I have to admit. And then it was again taught by like, yes, I'm a right person, I go somewhere and I just grab. And it was really interesting, really like, oh yeah, I have to accept these rules, and then to kind of to understand. And I talked to a friend from Australia, he said, yes, you know this, like if he's going in an Aboriginal community, it's like he always has to ask for permission to record sound. And yeah, I think it's super important to think about these things. Thank you.
I would like to ask why you do field recordings, so what is your purpose? Because you are a field recordings.
Yeah,
I mean,
I mean,
consider yourself.
yeah, that's a very. I mean, I consider myself a field recordist because I still record sound, but I also, since I went deeper into that, I do less and less field recordings, and I often rather just listen and then write. But within my project was actually to retrace the changes of the forest in the soundscape also, and also to find, like to follow the different polyvocal conversations that still go on in the forest. So, and that the recording was the access to that, of course. But now, yeah, I move also more and more away from the field recordings, and for example, I just installed a radio in the forest that is transmitting forest sounds, and where you could also meet and have discussions directly in the forest, and you can listen to that also from far away. But of course, with this comes also another set of questions I'm wondering about. So yeah, for me that's like also it makes it not easier to just press record for sure. Yeah, but
well, thank you for your talk, and for also our conversations before the talk as well, which I found really exciting. And I guess I wanted to say maybe an addendum to what you just said, which is that very often I think there's a relationship of field recording to a sense of surveillance. The so-called objectivity of being in a field and trying to record as if, as you pointed out so aptly, the recordist is not there, becomes more of a surveillance activity than a participatory activity. And to answer what you were saying, I don't think we could possibly ask animals for permission to record and be able to have a profound answer from them, but maybe in it's in a sense that would put you at ease.
Yeah.
But
But you can learn to read them better.
maybe, yeah. But
Biology, I mean, it's so complicated.
but I think what I wanted to say though is, and I think this is a really interesting point that you brought up, which is perhaps a way in which to think beyond these measures to look at this, when you're looking at this hegemonic relationship between the recordist and the recorded. I think that there's an extremely important relationship to hearing oneself in the recording. And I think what was striking to me about listening to this recording from Kate Cole at the very beginning was that you hear the bird, but actually you mostly hear the recording device. And that's extremely interesting to me. And I mean, in my own field recording work, I pay attention to being able to hear my breath, which I include hearing wind, which I include, and all of these other things that are traditionally
handling the material,
the sounds of the peaking moments when you drop something, which inevitably happens, or something falls, and that of anything I think becomes a relationship to I don't know. And so I kind of wonder about that for you, and how if that's something that I love what you say about the idea that writing and listening is also a field recording technology, and maybe the first. And I kind of wonder I'd love to hear more about how you feel about these ethics.
I mean,
Actually, we have to finish very soon just to answer, and then, sorry.
That is also, it's nice that you point to this again, to the position or the presence of myself on the recording, which is also very important for me. I'm always there, and I try to make myself also audible, not with language maybe, but like through these sounds, or also maybe through language. And because often this happens in field recordings, that I said also in the beginning, that we cut ourselves out of the field, but we are part of it, and that has to be considered as well, and should be audible, because otherwise we will not get over this separation and division.
Just want to confirm, because we are always part of it.
Yeah.
Right? I mean, we never can be not part of it, and we are always influencing what's around us. I mean, the bird might would sing very differently when we are not singing.
Thank you very much. Thank you. There's also the resources and the references.